Alexander Vraciu was a U.S. Navy fighter ace, a Navy Cross recipient, and a Medal of Honor nominee during World War II. At the end of the war, Vraciu ranked fourth among the U.S. Navy's flying aces, with 19 enemy planes down during flight and 21 destroyed on the ground. After the war, he served as a test pilot and was instrumental in forming the post-war Naval and Marine Air Reserve program. From 1956 to 1958, Vraciu led his own fighter squadron, VF-51, for 22 months. He retired from the U.S. Navy with the rank of commander on December 31, 1963. Vraciu later moved to Danville, California, and worked for Wells Fargo. Vraciu was born in East Chicago, Indiana, of Romanian immigrant parents. He graduated from DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana, and began his military career in 1941, when he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. During his military service in World War II, Vraciu flew Grumman F-6 Hellcats in the Pacific, spending 5 months as a wingman to his mentor, Edward "Butch" O'Hare, the Navy's first ace of the war. Vraciu's greatest success took place on June 19, 1944, during what became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, when he engaged a Japanese fighter squadron in air-to-air combat, downing 6 Japanese aircraft in 8 minutes using only 360 rounds of ammunition. In December 1944, Vraciu parachuted from his downed plane during a mission over the Philippines and spent 5 weeks with Filipino resistance fighters before rejoining American military forces and returning to the U.S. Lexington. Vraciu spent the last few months of the war serving at the Naval Air Test Center in Patuxent, Maryland. Early life and education. Vraciu was born in East Chicago, Indiana, on November 2, 1918, the second child and only son of Alexandru Sr. and Maria Vraciu. Vraciu's parents immigrated from Transylvania, Romania at the turn of the century, settling in East Chicago, where they met and were married. When Alex was 7 or 8 years old, the family traveled to Transylvania for a brief residence. His parents hoped that the experience would immerse the children in the culture. Afterward, the family returned to Indiana, where Vraciu resumed his education, graduating from East Chicago's Washington High School in 1937. Vraciu earned a 4-year scholarship to DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana, and graduated with a degree in sociology in 1941. At DePauw, Vraciu was active on the school's sports teams, became a member of the Delta Chi fraternity, and made the decision to become a pilot. During the summer between his junior and senior years in college, Vraciu participated in the civilian pilot training program at Muncie, Indiana, where he received a private pilot's license. On October 9, 1941, he enlisted as a naval aviator in the U.S. Navy Reserve. Marriage and family. Vraciu married Catherine Horn on August 24, 1944. The couple had 5 children, 3 daughters and 2 sons. Catherine died in 2003. Naval career. Pilot training. Following Vraciu's naval enlistment in 1941, he reported to Glenview Naval Air Station in suburban Chicago for preliminary training as a pilot, and received additional pilot training at Dallas and Corpus Christi, Texas, in early 1942, and in San Diego, California, in 1943. Vraciu was designated as a naval aviator and commissioned as a Naval Reserve ensign in August 1942, and promoted at the end of March 1943. Vraciu left San Diego in June for additional training at Puna Naval Air Station in Hawaii and joined Fighting Squadron 3, under Lieutenant Commander Edward "Butch" O'Hare. The U. U.S.Navy's first ace of the war. O'Hare chose Vraciu as his wingman and gave him valuable advice regarding air combat tactics. World War II service. Vraciu's first air-to-air combat took place over Wake Island in October 1943, flying from the light aircraft carrier U.S. Independence. Vraciu scored his first victory on October 5, 1943, when he and O'Hare encountered an enemy formation. O'Hare flew below the clouds to find a Japanese Mitsubishi Zero, and Vraciu lost sight of him. Vraciu followed a second Zero to Wake Island, where it landed, and strafed the Zero on the ground. Vraciu also destroyed his first Mitsubishi G4M bomber while it was parked on the runway. During a mission in the Gilbert Islands on November 20, 1943, Vraciu downed a Betty bomber. After the U.S. Independence was damaged in fighting with the Japanese, Vraciu's squadron transferred to the U.S. Essex, and by the end of January 1944 the men were aboard the U.S. Intrepid. The ship's nickname of the Evil Aunt, because of its reputation for bad luck, did not affect Vraciu's combat success. He began downing Japanese aircraft in multiples. On January 29, 1944, Vraciu shot down 3 Betty bombers, bringing his total number of downed enemy planes to 5, achieving status as an ace. On February 17, he shot down 4 Japanese fighters over Truk Atoll. With 9 victories, he became and remained VF-6's leading ace of the war. When the U.S. Intrepid returned to Pearl Harbor for repairs in February 1944, Vraciu had an opportunity to rotate back to the United States, but he preferred to stay in the Pacific and requested additional combat duty. He joined VF-16 aboard the U.S. Lexington on February 27, 1944. Vraciu's most successful day as an aviator occurred on June 19, 1944. During the First Battle of the Philippine Sea, also known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, despite a malfunctioning supercharger, he intercepted a formation of Japanese dive bombers and destroyed 6 in a period of 8 minutes. After Vraciu landed, the ordnanceman on Lexington discovered that he had used only 360 rounds of ammunition. On June 20, 1944, while escorting bombers in an attack on the Japanese mobile fleet, Vraciu downed his 19th plane, making him the leading U.S. Navy ace, although he held that title for only 4 months. Vraciu was nominated for the Medal of Honor for his actions at the First Battle of the Philippine Sea. However, when the nomination reached the desk of Admiral George D. Murray at Pacific Fleet Headquarters in Hawaii, it was downgraded to a Navy Cross. Vraciu returned to the United States on leave in August 1944, and was promoted to a lieutenant upon his return to San Diego, California. Until he received orders for a new combat assignment, Vraciu made public appearances to promote the U.S. Navy in the United States. Vraciu returned to combat in the Pacific in late 1944, flying Grumman F-6F Hellcats in VF-20. On December 14, 1944, after 2 missions with VF-20, his plane was downed by anti-aircraft fire during a mission over the Philippines. Vraciu parachuted from his plane, landing in the Tarlac province of Luzon. He was rescued by Filipino resistance fighters, who appointed him a brevet major in command of a guerrilla unit. After spending 5 weeks with the guerrilla fighters, Vraciu rejoined American military forces and returned to the U.S. Lexington. He spent the last few months of the war serving at the Naval Air Test Center in Patuxent, Maryland. Vraciu ended the war as the U.S. Navy's fourth highest-ranking ace, credited with downing a total of 19 enemy aircraft and destroying 21 on the ground. Post-war service. Following his World War II service, Vraciu was promoted to lieutenant commander and spent 6 years as a test pilot. He was instrumental in forming the post-war Naval and Marine Air Reserve program. After staff assignments with the U.S. Navy in Washington, D.C., Vraciu became a jet training officer at Los Alamitos Naval Air Station in Orange County, California, and attended the Naval Postgraduate School at Monterey, California. Promoted to commander, Vraciu led his own fighter squadron, VF-51, for 22 months, from 1956 to 1958, and won the individual gunnery championship at the U.S. Navy's Air Weapons Meet at El Centro, California in 1957. Vraciu officially retired from the U.S. Navy on December 31, 1963, while serving as the Public Information Officer at the Alameda Naval Air Station in Oakland, California. Later years. After retiring from the U.S. Navy, Vraciu moved to Danville, California, where he worked for Wells Fargo Bank. In retirement he continued to give public lectures to schools, businesses, and civic groups. Vraciu appeared in The Zero Killer during Season 1, Episode 6 of the History Channel's Dogfights series. In his later years, Vraciu declined invitations to write an autobiography. However, he agreed to be interviewed and participated in oral history projects at the Indiana Historical Society and the University of North Texas, which eventually resulted in the publication of his biography, Fighter Pilot: The World War II Career of Alex Vraciu. Death and legacy. Vraciu died on January 29, 2015, in West Sacramento, California, at the age of 96. Historian Barrett Tillman acknowledged that Vraciu's mild-mannered and easygoing demeanor in his everyday life was atypical of his steely aggressiveness in combat. Ray Boomhauer, Vraciu's biographer, commented that the fighter pilot and wartime hero was straightforward in the discussions, adding that Vraciu always gave credit to those who had trained him. Awards: Navy Cross, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal, United States Navy High Individual, 1957. Gallery.